Today, the sandwich generation. Baby boomers caught between caring for college-age kids and aging parents. How can this new generation of caregivers cope emotionally and financially? And coming up, survival tips you can't afford to miss. The Prudent Advisor begins right now.
But addressing finances in particular, I mean, my parents were willing to talk about some help in the household or where they should live and etc. But they had always, from the Depression on, been very fiercely proud of what they were able to do in terms of saving and creating their own safety and finances. They didn't really want to share that with me and my brother. How do you start that conversation?
That's a good question, and I don't know if that's the question you ask directly, or if that's the question you work with, and you begin to discuss the needs of having durable power of attorneys and all these other options that will provide them the opportunity to have their decisions honored, to directly ask them about their financial decisions and what they have. Most people still hold that fairly close to their heart.
Right, and is it important to somehow not get the door slammed so that there's a little bit of an edge there to open it when to make another pass at it? And if so, how do you do that?
I would suggest that you always think of how you would like to be treated as an older adult. And so if you put that first in your mind and begin to think how you're going to ask these questions and how you're going to present the needs or the options to that older adult parent in light of respecting them and their freedom and helping them so that you can honor their decisions, that's not going to be, the door won't be shut.
Well, this is fascinating. I want to talk a little bit about where you draw the line between your particular needs and your children's needs and the needs of your elderly parents. And all right. And when the Prudent Advisor returns, we'll continue this conversation with Susan Cunningham and Dr. Janice Wassel.
And a little later, we'll give you some tips about how to cope if you're in the middle of the sandwich generation.
Stay with us.
I want to pick up right where John took us before the break. For people in the sandwich generation, they have claims from their children, perhaps financial claims, certainly time claims. Their aging parents may need more and more help from them, and they've got needs in their own marriage, needs for themselves. What are the general precepts for how to draw that line? Susan?
I'm not sure you want to draw a line in the sand at all. I think you want to, I find most of the folks, the sandwich people, sandwich generation, need to reach out. They forget. You know, this generation of sandwich generation, women especially, think we can do it all. And where we can do a great deal, but it only takes 6 months of full-time caregiving for the caregiver to start having their own health issues. And I think folks forget that, that you need to, don't draw any lines in the sand. Reach out to have everyone within this sandwich, if you will, help. You know, even the kids, even the young kids can read to grandma. There can be help from other family members. There can be neighbors. There can be community services. All of these things and people and organizations that can assist. So everybody can pull their weight, if you will.
You mentioned kids. I think that's terribly important because it's a great benefit to the grandparent and for the child to remember. I can remember stories my grandmother told me that I never would have heard any other time except I spent some time with her, and then and she enjoyed, I'm sure, being with a young child. And,
absolutely, and it's the two excuse me, it's the two generations assisting each other and helping each other learn about the younger generation and the much older generation. You know, it comes together when you share that.
Yeah. Now, speaking of sandwiches, Janice, what about the senior sandwich?
Well, the senior sandwich is very interesting. You spoke earlier about the number of individuals that have older parents alive, and that percentage has increased across time. What is very interesting is because of fertility behaviors of the boomers, later marriage, later divorce, later remarriage, later children bearing children.
Later,
and
later.
Absolutely. Then what that does is many individuals end up in their 60s with a 92-year-old parent, so they're a 62-year-old kid with a 14-year-old child. Some friends I know say we might as well just have our Social Security checks deposited straight to our kids' college tuition fund, to pay our college. So then you're looking at even more than the physical caregiving. You're looking at different financial decisions that you're going to need to make. And that's when it becomes critical to not only look at the family decisions, but the financial decisions and your financial gerontology. So what you need to begin doing is realizing I have to start putting my money into my retirement, but you've got competing demands.
Well, and what about that? I mean, if you're trying to pay for college, for your own retirement, and financial support for your aging parents, for most families, something's got to give.
Something's got to give. That's a good question. Very interesting. In the past decade, we've seen a phenomenal return to refeathering the nest by our 18 to 24-year-old kids. Now, nearly 50% of kids are living at home. In 1990, it was only 24%.
Really? It's changed that much?
It's changed that much. And so exactly what is going to give? Well, most boomers are going to work longer, and they're going to retire later. But even then, you need to be concerned, because most individuals give a year or an age that they're going to retire, but they actually retire several years before that. So what is going to give? You're going to have to always remember to pay yourself first, because of that value added, time value added to your money. So you may have to cut other places.
Before we go, I wanted to ask a question of Susan about your book. I was intrigued. First of all, it's nice large print. You don't need those little glasses to read it.
Yes.
And you tell these stories. Where'd you get the idea, instead of saying, chapter 1, here's what you should do in this circumstance, and lay it out like a lecture or an instruction book? You just have stories, personal story after personal story.
Because people relate to that. They see themselves in the book. I hear that over and over again. Oh, you must have written about my mom. Oh, here's my dad. This is exactly what happened to me. So they relate. Everybody relates to a story better. And there are a lot of how-to books out there, but they're...
But you usually have a question at the bottom
Yes.
of the story. I mean, do you have a lesson in mind, or is it open-ended, what I'm going to learn from each of these stories?
It's very open-ended. I wanted this to be a book that people could pick up anywhere, read in the book, any story that spoke to them, if you will. And then at the end is a sentence that just kind of tweaks your thought process. If it's about taking car keys away, then let's have a sentence at the end that says, think about this. What are you going to do? Plan ahead. What are you going to do about this? If it's about bringing in-home care, where do you think you're going to find this? So it's just a little...
Did you find families that had addressed this question of paying for college, retirement, and senior care all at the same time, and had an answer for that?
Oh, I think Dr. Wassel said it right. Everybody's different. Everybody has to do what's right for them. And because this is the first time this has ever happened in our country, in our history, this sandwich. It used to be you worked for 30 years, you got the gold watch, you sat on the rocking chair, and then you checked out. Well, all that's different now. So the whole planning thing is different. So, yes, you run into folks, but what can you afford to put aside?
Susan, you and Janice have helped a lot of people cope with that situation, for being here today and explaining the problem, and plan ahead.
That's it.
Plan ahead.
Yes. Plan ahead. And when we come back, we'll share some tips on how to cope if you find yourself in the middle of the sandwich generation.